All right, Yevamos, good morning. Let us begin. I'll begin by thanking all of our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Nissan. To thank Jerry and Abby Applebaum and family for dedicating all those shiurim and drashos in memory of Basia Bas Chaim and David Ben Avram. To thank Doctors Paul and Linda Weinberg for dedicating the shiur in memory of Mordechai Yehoshua, Ben Peretz Moshe, Miriam, Paul and Kathy Pollack in the zchus of refuah sheileimah for Donna Baker-Matson, Stephen Teri Czinn, with gratitude to Hashem for their grandson, Bunim Tzvi Hersch, Naftali Tilson, with Akar Satov to his friend, to his chaver Benjamin Wohl, to the entire shir, and Avraham Shaindy Kelman in memory of Sara Braina Bas Yehoshua Heschel. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah. All of those will have a refuah together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. And we'll see with that, let us begin. We have a really beautiful daf and actually some really interesting halacha l'maisa today. And Meretz Hashem, we're going to get to it. Today's daf is Nun Aleph 51. And we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Nun Amud Beis. We left off on Nun Amud Beis 50b, 2-4 lines in. Umay Taima Amar Abanon, Maimer Biyavama Mahani. So remember again, just to reframe a little bit. We had a fascinating Mishnah yesterday which discussed a fundamental machlokes in Rabbi Gamliel and Chachamim regarding the topic of what we call get achar get, ma'amar achar ma'amar. Simple case, Rabbi, you have Shimon died, left behind two, I don't know why I keep doing Shimon died. Reuven died, left behind two wives, Rachel and Leah. Right, they fall to Shimon in Yibum. So remember again, for whatever the reason is, Shimon goes ahead and gives a get to Rachel, then gives a get to Leah. Or does Ma'amar with Rachel, then gives a get to Leah. We saw the variations of cases as well. And I both say, so what is the Mishnah trying to figure out? It's very simple. Obviously, once you're giving a get, let me say it differently. What we're trying to figure out is, the machlokes is, what's the impact on the get or ma'amar on wife number 2? So according to Rabbi Gamliel holds in get achar get, and we'll discuss his svara in today's daf. He holds that essentially once you go ahead and you give a get to Rachel, so remember again, the giving of a get does what? Shuts down the process. In other words, that yibum no longer is possible, right? You're still going to require chalitza. But according to Rabbi Gamliel, once you do it to Rachel, ultimately anything you do to Leah is inconsequential. We'll say, how does that manifest itself in a very important way? That assuming that that Shimon does chalitza with Rachel, that's going to mean that Leah, and technically speaking, I should say Leah's relatives, would technically be permitted to Shimon. As opposed to the Chachamim who say, yesh get achar get, and therefore when you give a get to both Yevamos, halacha l'maisa, that has an impact on both of them. And therefore again, both of them and their relatives will be prohibited to the Yavam, to Shimon. So we established a number of different pieces yesterday. So number one, once a get is given, halacha l'maisa, even though a get does not affect chalitza, once a get is given, it closes the door on yibum, and chalitza must be done. We also saw that halacha l'maisa, once you do ma'amar by definition will require what? A get. Right? So in other words, once you do ma'amar, if he has a change of heart and does not want to do yibum with this woman, that is absolutely going to require a get, and chalitza by itself would not be enough. The Mishnah also stated a principle. And what was the principle? That once you have chalitza, what does chalitza do? Shuts down everything. Right? Chalitza effectively ends the process. Yet, interestingly enough, we're not sure if bia, or if quote-unquote yibum, does the same thing or not. That's a machlokes. Okay, so we'll say, so with that, we're now trying to kind of understand a little bit of the svara of the Mishnah. So here we go. So we'll say, remember again, in yesterday's daf, so we spoke about the idea that why does it get, right? Why does it get effectively preclude yibum, right? Why does it get act as a quasi chalitza? So remember again, we'll say what we're concerned about, because get dissolves a marriage, chalitza dissolves a marital bond, and we're concerned that halacha l'maisa, if after giving a get yibum is still possible, people may erroneously think that what? After chalitza, yibum is still possible as well. In order to go ahead and prevent that possibility, Chazal says, this is all rabbinic. Chazal said if you give a get to your yevama, we're done here. We're done here. They're not totally done here. We're still going to acquire chalitza, but yibum becomes impossible. Same idea. Why did Chazal say that maimer works? So remember again, what's maimer? So maimer is a rabbinic concept. I said this whole concept of maimer. Remember, maimer is essentially kiddushin, right? So Shimon the Yavam goes over to Rachel, gives her a ring, says, Hariat mekudesh asli b'tabazu, right? So again, in midaraisa, meaningless. There's only one way to solidify yibum relationship, and that is through bia. So why did Chazal say that maimer works? Mishum demahani ba'alma. Because we'll say the truth is, because kiddushin works in every other situation in Jewish marriage. Diamrit lo mahani, because we're concerned is as follows. If you say that maimer has no effect, amri maimer liknos ubia liknos. People will say like this. Normally, in order to acquire it, in order to affect marriage, maimer works, and bia works, because remember again, you can affect kiddushin in many different ways. Umid the maimer lo mahani, and since maimer doesn't work over here, bia nami lo mahanya. People will erroneously assume that bia doesn't work to affect a yibum relationship as well. Va'asi lemival achar bia. And what are we concerned about, Abosai? And if a man is confused and thinks that bia does not affect yibum, then it could happen that what? He'll have bia with Rachel, and then think that bia with Leah is still permitted as well. So in order to avoid any confusion on that, Chazal said, maimer works. Maimer works. It works. Good. Umay tamar Rabbanan, bia psula yeshachar eklum. The Rabbi say, why is it that Chazal said that a bia psula? The Rabbi says, an interesting lashon. What's bia psula? So I'll say, bia psula essentially is any bia that happened after another process. So, for example, Shimon goes ahead and gives a get to Rachel and then has bia with Leah. So we'll say, so that's called the bia psula, right? So it's a bia that comes on the heels of another yibum related process. So why did Chazal say? Bia psula yeshachar eklum? So we'll say, see, here's what's interesting. Remember, the machlokas in the Mishnah was that we don't say. So let's play that out for just a moment. Shimon gives Rachel a get and has bia with Leah. So it would be tempting to say, what's the resolution of this case? What should be the resolution? Right, yipum, and therefore, what should have to happen with Rachel? Technically, nothing. Right, just leave it alone. Just leave it alone. Yet that's not the case. Once you've done ma'amar, you have to go ahead, or once you've done a get, you have to unravel these things a bit more. So why is it that halacha lamaisa bia psula doesn't solidify this case? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. So my time Rabbanan bia psula yeshachar eklum amri bia achar geti, because if we're concerned about bia after giving a get, so the Gemara says, bia achar get he gzera bia achar get mishum bia achar chalitza, because we would be concerned about a case of bia achar get, lest you come to confuse it with the case of bia, right? Of bia after chalitza, the bia achar ma'amari, and if it's a case of bia after ma'amar, gzera bia achar ma'amar mishum bia achar bia. Good. So we'll say, so therefore we have to be concerned lest you come to all of these other cases. So we'll say, why did Chazal say? So here's the difference. Chalitza psula. Now we'll say, what's chalitza psula? So for example, look at Rashi, 5 lines up from the bottom. Chalitza psula, sha'achar get o achar ma'amar. So we'll say, same idea. So chalitza psula is, for example, Shimon did ma'amar. Let's just do ma'amar. Shimon did ma'amar with Rachel, and does chalitza with Leah. That's called chalitza psula. Right? We'll say, because remember again, the Gemara uses lashon of puzzle any time that yibum or chalitza are not occurring by themselves, but there has been something else that has been done with the other wife. They call that chalitza psula. But I want to be clear, chalitza psula, it doesn't mean that the chalitza is no good, right? Or that the bia is no good. That doesn't mean pasuk in the classic sense. It means, I'm trying to think of the better word for psula over here, unimpaired, right? No. Deficient, good. But again, I will say, but I want to be clear, deficient here doesn't mean that it doesn't work, right? Because, for example, in the case of chalitza psula absolutely does work. Now, bia psula is a machlokes in Mishnah whether or not it works. But for example, chalitza psula means we'll call it, this is better, imperfect chalitza. An imperfect chalitza. It works, but it's not done in the way we would like it. So the Gemara says, why do we say that when there's an imperfect chalitza, that does shut down the process, right? And halacha l'maisa, there's nothing to do afterwards. In other words, that is an effective chalitza. Amri my ligzar. Because what should we be concerned about? Migzar chalitza achar a get. If you're concerned about chalitza after a get, in other words, that you gave a get to Rachel, and then chalitza with Leah, or mishum chalitza achar chalitza, and maybe you'll be concerned because lest you come to a case of chalitza after chalitza, kol kihani tachlos v'tezel. Rabbi said, the truth is, we don't care. You can do chalitza as many times as you want, right? You want to do chalitza with every co-wife? No problem. Do chalitza as many times as you want. So, ligzar chalitza achar mamar, mishum chalitza achar bia. Maybe you're going to be concerned about a case of chalitza after mamar, lest you come to a case of chalitza after bia. Atu chalitza achar mamar, milo baya get la ma'amaro. Rabbi say, the truth is, if you do chalitza after mamar, even chalitza after mamar, you're still going to require what? A get for the mamar. So the Gemara says, chalitza achar bia, nami baya get lebiaso. The truth is, in a case of chalitza after bia, which means again, there was bia with Rachel, and then chalitza with Leah, you're still going to require a get ultimately for Rachel. Shabbos says, so therefore again, halacha l'maisa, what comes out from here is as follows. Number one, that we've established that ma'amar works midrabanan. We've explained why. We've established that get works, so to speak, midrabanan. We've established why. We've also established a halacha l'maisa, chalitza psula. Once you have even an imperfect chalitza, that ends this yibum narrative. But interestingly enough, a bia psula does not stop the process still from potentially progressing. Good. Amar Rava. We'll say, here we go. Amar Rava. Rava said as follows. My time with Rabbi Gamliel. So we'll say top of Nun Aleph. My time with Rabbi Gamliel. So we'll say, now we're going back. We're still going back to the Mishnah. Remember again, Rabbi Gamliel in the Mishnah said, Ein get achar get. Right? Ein get achar get. So Allah said there is no get after a get. So the Gemara says, so what's Rabbi Gamliel's logic? Right? By the way, it's not just get achar get. Ein ma'amar achar ma'amar. Essentially, Rabbi Gamliel essentially says is what? It sounds like what he's saying is, once you do something with wife number one, then what? Then what? We're done. We're done. Anything you do with wife number two is inconsequential. So you give a get to wife number one, you give a get to wife number one. Okay, that's the end of this process. There's nothing more. There's nothing more to discuss. I will say again, when I say there's nothing more to discuss, is there still more that the Yavam has to do? Yeah, what does he have to do? Chalitza. So let's do chalitza. But lamaisa vis-a-vis wife number two, once he takes action with wife number one, any subsequent action with wife number two is fundamentally irrelevant. So let's understand this. My time with Rabbi Gamliel. The Mesapkale, Rabbi Gamliel's suffix is as follows. He says like this: get idachi ilo dachi ma'amar ikani ilo kani. They will say Rabbi Gamliel's suffix is very simple. He's not sure about the effectiveness of get and ma'amar. That's it. We all understand that these are rabbinic constructs. He's just simply not clear about how strong they actually are. How strong is get? How strong is ma'amar? Right? Ultimately, again, when a man gives his Yevama a get, when Shimon gives Rachel a get, does that close the door? Are we done? Are we totally done? In which case, again, I understand. In which case, again, that halacha l'maisa, then there's nothing to talk about vis-a-vis Leah, or maybe not. Maybe halacha l'maisa, it kind of just strains the Yibum relationship, but doesn't totally end it. Same thing with ma'amar. Does ma'amar fully acquire? Does ma'amar not fully acquire? So the Gemara, let's analyze. Get, idachi, ilodachi. So when it comes to get, does it get totally preclude the possibility of Yibum or not? So, ikamadachi, basar my kavis. So, let's analyze this. If get really works, and get closes the door on Yibum, then once he does that with Rachel, then what? There's nothing to talk about by Leah. Nothing to talk about by Leah. Ikama basar nami lodachi. And furthermore, well, if get doesn't work by Rachel, then what Rabbi say? Then what? Get doesn't work by Leah, right? So Rabbi say, Rabbi Gamliel says like this. I don't understand. Either way, Leah should remain unimpacted when Rachel already received the get, because mimanav shach. If the get works, then ultimately, again, the process has been completed with Rachel. Completed, in parentheses, you still need chalitza. But therefore, anything subsequent with Leah is meaningless. And if get doesn't work, then the same way get doesn't work, bless you, get doesn't work with Rachel, it's not going to work with Leah. Either way, says Rabbi Gamliel, Leah should remain unaffected by receiving a get after Rachel. The Gemara goes weiter. Right, similarly again, so Basra Nami Lo Dachi. Maimar, what about Maimar? I Lo Kani. So Rabbi Gamliel is not sure. Does Maimar affect Kiddushin? Does it affect some heightened level of marital bond? Not affect some level of heightened marital bond. So let's analyze. So the Gemara says, I Kama Kani Basra Mai Kavid. So if Maimar works with Rachel, then what? There's nothing to talk about with Leah. Vi Kama Lo Kani Basra Nami Lo Kani. And if Maimar doesn't work with Rachel, then what? It's not going to work with Leah as well. In other words, Rabbi Gamliel is simply unsure about the strength of get and ma'amar. But either way, he says, Leah, wife number 2, should simply remain unimpacted. Because if get / ma'amar work, then he's done it with Rachel, Leah doesn't need anything. If get / ma'amar don't work, in the same way they don't work with Rachel, they shouldn't work with Leah. They're both saying, by the way, just understand, the ramifications of saying that Leah is unaffected is what? Is that then Shimon could later on marry her relatives. Right? That's the impact of this. Right? That Shimon can later on marry her relatives because she's not considered to be his chalutza or his grusha, so to speak. Good. The Gemara says, Eisvei abai savar izekasha umod Rabbi Gamliel sheyesh get achar ma'amar uma'amar achar haget. Listen to this. Yet Abai says as follows. Rabbi Gamliel agrees that there is get achar ma'amar and ma'amar after get. The get achar bia, and there's get after bia, uma'amar achar bia. And Abba say, for example, if you were to have a case of 3 wives, right? Ma'amar achar bia. So I don't understand. I don't understand why that is, says the Gemara. If that's the case, Rabbi Gamliel is not sure how get and ma'amar work, then in a case, ultimately, again, where there's bia, let that be a bia lechatchila and affect yibum. Because we learned, habeila bizman shi betchila eina charei klum. Rabbi say one of the things we did agree with, as much as there's a machlokas about bia psula, what did we agree with? That when bia is the first thing that occurs, that effectively cements the Yibum relationship, and there's nothing more to discuss. So if Rabbi Gamliel is truly mesupak about the power of get or ma'amar, in any case where there's bia involved, let the get and the ma'amar kind of be set aside. Let the bia be a bia lechatchila, and the fact Yibum. Abai says no, something a little bit different. Listen to this. Abai says, really, Rabbi Gamliel holds get pushes her aside. Dachi means pushes her away. Once a get is given, that is a get we look at as the initial stage of chalitza. Again, not complete, you still need to do chalitza, but it's the initial stage of chalitza. And ma'amar is the initial stage of yibum. So I said, take a look at Rashi. Rashi says over here, Mihu, actually, let's finish for Mihu, Amrabana, actually, no, let's take a look at Rashi. Ella, Rashi, Pshita le di get dachi kitsas. I will say this lashon is very important. According to Rabbi Gamliel, when you give your Yevama a get, what does that do? Dachi lo kitsas. What does that mean? Pushes her away a little bit. Very, very precise, right? Right, like a little bit. And ma'amar kani kitsas acquires a little bit. I will say, just way to illustrate this is as follows. In Rabbi Gamliel's worldview, so again, like we just said before, ma'amar is the beginning of yibum, and get is the beginning of chalitza. It's not yibum and it's not chalitza, but it brings those respective processes just a bit closer. That's the lashon of kitsas. Finish the Rashi. Umiu my taima yesh ma'amar achar get the get achar ma'amar. If that's the case, then according to Rabbi Gamliel, why does he hold that there's ma'amar achar get and get achar ma'amar? Ve'in ma'amar achar ma'amar velo get achar get. Yet There's no ma'amar achar ma'amar get achar get. To which the Gemara says, Rabbanon bechad tzad mahani. Actually, let's see in the Gemara now. So therefore, Abaye says, in reality, Rabbi Gamliel's position, supposed to be very important. Rabbi Gamliel's position is that ultimately, again, get pushes her away a little bit, the beginning of chalitza, and ma'amar brings her closer a little bit, the beginning of yibum. Now watch this. Mihu Rabbanon hayavama bechad tzad mahani baget. Ubechad tzad mahani b'mamar. Get achar get lo dachi. Daha lekama. Umamar achar ma'amar lo kani. Daha kani lekama. So we'll say, listen to this. Rabbi Gamliel will say as follows. So let me read that again. The Rabbanan say like this. Hi Yevama, this particular Yevama in question. Bechad tzad mahani baget. Ubechad tzad mahani b'mamar. So we'll say on one hand, get works a little bit, and mamar works a little bit. Therefore, again, here we go. So the Gemara says, mamar, so get achar get lo dachi. So we'll say, get achar get won't work. Why won't get achar get work? Because lamaisa, dahadacha lekama. Because we'll say, once you've used get, once the yavam has used get, then by definition he's activated that process, and you can't activate that same process twice. Umamar achar ma'amar lo kani. Same idea, ma'amar achar ma'amar won't work as well. Dahakani lekama. Get achar ma'amar, umamar achar get, hai milsa kadachi, v'ha milsa kakani. Shabbos says this is fascinating. According to Rabbi Gamliel, he agrees that ma'amar and get work a little bit. But the issue just is, essentially, every yavam has one get and one ma'amar in his yavam quiver, right? He's got one possibility. So once you go ahead and you use your ma'amar, that's it. So you use your ma'amar on Rachel. There's no such thing as another ma'amar process for Leah. It doesn't work. But every yavam, same thing with get. Once you use your get for Rachel, you don't have a get for Leah. But once halacha, but remember, every yavam does have, what does he have in his yibum quiver? He does have one get and one ma'amar. Say if you did a get with Rachel, technically speaking, you could do a ma'amar with Leah, right? And once you did a ma'amar with Rachel, you could do a get with Leah. So I'll say this is the shita of Rabbi Gamliel. So what comes out over here is that Rabbi Gamliel holds that ma'amar and get do affect something, ktsas, a little bit. But ultimately, the yavam is only vested with one ma'amar and one get per yibum scenario. And therefore, again, Rabbi Gamliel will hold ein get achar get, ein ma'amar achar ma'amar, yet he will hold yesh ma'amar achar get, v'yesh get achar ma'amar. Good. For Rabbanon, what did the Rabbanon do with all of this? For Rabbanon, kol chad v'chad takin le Rabbanon get u'ma'amar b'yivama. So we'll say, this is actually fascinating. The Rabbanon, on the other hand, holds that each woman, this is going to sound strange, but each Yevama comes with a get and a ma'amar, right? Yevama comes along, get and ma'amar included, right? So in other words, and each of those possibilities comes with each Yevama. So I'll say, it's actually fascinating. It's almost as if the fundamental machlokes is, who is it that has the right to get and ma'amar? Is that a right that's vested with the yavam, or is that a right that comes along with the yavama? We will say, what's the nafkamina? The nafkamina is, if it comes with the yavam, how many do you have? One of each. If it comes with the yavama, then there is a get and ma'amar per wife. And I will say, that's easy the nafkamina. So the Rabbanon hold that each wife, right, or each woman comes, so to speak, with a ma'amar and a get. And therefore, technically speaking, the yavam, right, Shimon, could do ma'amar or get with each of these women. Therefore, again, the Ravana will hold yesh get achar get, yesh ma'amar achar ma'amar. Fascinating fundamental machlokes. Good. V'hai bia psula adifa mi ma'amar. And I will say this bia psula. Once again, remember again, what's the definition of a bia psula? A bia psula is an act of bia that occurs after either ma'amar or get. So in other words, Shimon did something with Rachel, either get or ma'amar, and then has bia with Leah. That's called a bia psula. So the Gemara says, "V'hai bia psula adifa mi ma'amar." Bia psula is stronger than ma'amar. Ugriya mi ma'amar. But yet, in certain respects, it's stronger than ma'amar. In other respects, it's weaker than ma'amar. How so? Adifa mi ma'amar, stronger than ma'amar. Dilu ma'amar, achar ma'amar, lo mahani. Because we'll say one act of ma'amar after another act of ma'amar does not work. Does not work. To which the Gemara says, V'ilu bia achar ma'amar mahani. But ultimately, again, bia after ma'amar does work. So they'll say that's how it's stronger. Ugriya mi ma'amar, but on the other hand, it's weaker than ma'amar. How so? Di'ilu ma'amar achar haget kani lekuli shira diget. Because we also listen to this. Listen to this. So the Gemara says, because ma'amar achar get, right? When he does ma'amar after the get, kani lekuli shiura diget. Ultimately, you know, both say that literally goes ahead and let me see it like this. After you go ahead, ma'amar achar get, after you give a get, so both say there's still some element of zika that's left. Still some element of zika that's left. So ultimately, again, when ma'amar is done after the get, the ma'amar, so to speak, absorbs the rest of the remaining zika. V'ilu bia achar haget, we'll explain that in just a moment. V'ilu bia achar haget, but ultimately, again, where there is bia after a get, lo kanyele lekuli shiuri di get. The bia itself does not absorb the rest of the zika. I will say we'll see what that means in just a moment because we're going to come back in a little bit to the machlokes once again about yesh zika or ein zika. We'll see. So turn out, but let's analyze. So we'll say, so here's our machlokes. Okay, so we accomplished a lot just now. We'll say, so Allah Chalamai, so what we know is you have our machlokes in the Mishnah of Rabbi Gamliel and the Rabbanon. Rabbi Gamliel holds in get achar get, in ma'amar achar ma'amar. The Rabbanon hold yesh get achar get, yesh ma'amar achar ma'amar. So we'll say, so now what do we understand? We understand that halacha l'maisa, everyone agrees, ma'amar and get, rabbinic concepts, right? What do they accomplish? Again, it's interesting because we have a very non-precise and imprecise definition, right? They accomplish kitzas. What seems to be the fundamental machlokas? Rabbi say, is the right of ma'amar and get vested with the yavam, the man, or the yavama, the wife? Rabbi Gamliel holds is vested with the yavam. Therefore, one get, one ma'amar per customer. So therefore, again, get achar get doesn't work. Ma'amar achar ma'amar doesn't work. But what does work? What does work? According to Rabbi Gamliel, get achar ma'amar or ma'amar achar get. The Rabbanan hold no. The right to ma'amar and get ultimately again is vested with the yavama, vested with the wife. So every woman comes, so to speak, with her own ma'amar or get, and therefore the yavam could technically do ma'amar with each of them. Again, I will say not good to, but could technically do ma'amar, could technically give a get to both of them. Incredible. Let's go back to turn on them. So Keitza Rabbi Gamliel ain't get achar get. So we'll say, what's the case? Rabbi Gamliel says there's no get achar get. Here we go. Shtei Yevamos. We'll say this is just restating of a lot of the cases we saw before. Shtei Yevamos shenaflu lifnei yavam echad. Two women fall before one yavam. Right, Reuven dies. Rachel fall before Shimon. Nissan get lazu, get lazu. Since Shimon gives a get to Rachel, a get to Leah. Rabbi Gamliel omer choletz l'rishona. Basa bekravo sel umuter bekravo shnia. We'll say Rabbi Gamliel who holds ein get achar get, right? Holds that what do you have to do? Do chalitza with Rachel, and we're done. And I will say the get that he gave to Leah is irrelevant, and therefore what? He is permitted to marry the relatives of Leah. The Chum say, no son get lazu, asa bekrovos shtehen, v'chalitza la'achas mehen. The Chum on the other hand say, yesh get achar get, and therefore Allah l'maisa, he has to do chalitza with one of them. Let's assume he's going to do chalitza with Rachel, but the relatives of Leah still remain prohibited to him. We'll say that's just the exact case in the Mishnah. V'chein ata omer, so too you could find b'shnei yavim v'yavama achas. The same case would apply, we'll say, not if there weren't two wives and one yavam, but even if there were two yavams and one woman. Keitzad, Amr Gamliel in ma'amar achar ma'amar. What would be the case where Gamliel will say there's no ma'amar achar ma'amar? Shtei yavamos shenaflu lifnei yavam echad. So we'll say this would be a case where what? Reuven died, left behind one wife Rachel and two brothers Shimon and Levi. Echad. So the Gemara says, listen to this. Shnei yavamos shenaflu lifnei yavam echad. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. No. Two wives, right? Rachel and Leah fall before Shimon. The Gemara says, "Va'asa ma'amar bezu u'ma'amar bezu," and he did ma'amar with Rachel, ma'amar with Leah. Rabbi Gamliel Omer no sin get l'rishona v'choletzla va'asa b'kravosah. Now, I will say, once you did ma'amar with both of them, the problem is you can't marry both women. So that's going to require ultimately a get, let's say, to Rachel, and then ultimately chalitza with Rachel. But once again, Rabbi Gamliel holds in ma'amar achar ma'amar, and therefore Leah leaves this picture, and halacha l'maisa Shimon will be permitted to marry her relatives. Mutar b'krova shniya. V'cham say no sin get l'shteihen. You have to give a get to both of them. Ba'asa b'krovos shteihen, and you'll be prohibited to marry the relatives of both of them because the chachamim hold yesh get achar get or ma'amar achar ma'amar. V'chalitza la'achas man. V'china ta'omer b'shnei yavmim v'yevamachas. The same halacha I will say would apply. We're dealing with a case where there's two women to one brother. But the same case would apply if there are two brothers to one woman. In other words, Reuven dies, leaves behind one wife, Rachel, and then what happens? There's two brothers, Shimon and Levi. Amar, no sin get lazu v'get lazu. So I will say, therefore, you will be the halacha, you'd give a get to each one. Rabbi Gamliel Omer, choletz l'rishona v'asa b'krovosea umutar b'krovos shniya. To which the Gemara says, "Lema to have it to the Shmuel." Shouldn't this be a refutation of Shmuel? Because what the Shmuel said, "Amar Shmuel, chalatz leba'alas haget lo nifterat sarasa." So I'll say Shmuel has an interesting position. Shmuel says that if you go ahead and you do chalitza with a woman with whom you've given a get, right? So we'll say, so let's say again, Reuven goes ahead and same case, Reuven dies, leaves behind Rachel and Leah. Rachel and Leah fall to Shimon. Shimon gives a get to Rachel and then does chalitza with Rachel. Chalas labalas haget lo nifterat Sara. We'll say it's wild. Shmuel says Leah is not free. Leah is not free. Now we'll say, now why not? Take a look at Rashi. Let me do the Shmuel, the Amar Shmuel Chalatz. It's 5 lines up from the bottom. Naflu l'fanav shtei Yevamos. If again I will say Shimon dies and Rachel and Leah fall before Shimon. Reuven dies and Rachel and Leah fall before Shimon. And what happened? V'nasan get la'achas mihen. Shimon gives a get to Rachel. V'achar kach chalatzla. Then he goes ahead and does chalitza with Rachel. Lo nifterat sarasa. Listen to this. I will say Shmuel holds that Leah is not free and clear. Right? Brosi, I just want to tell you, listen to this chiddush. It's not a chiddush, Shmuel's position. Reuven dies, leaves behind 2 widows, Rachel and Leah. Right? They fall to Shimon. Shimon gives Rachel a get. Okay, for whatever the reason. And then does chalitza with Rachel. Based on everything we've learned up until this point in time. What's the next stage in this process? Nothing, we're done. Shmuel says, no, you're not. No, you're not. Leah is still going to require chalitza. What? Why would Leah require chalitza? So Shmuel says something as look at Rashi. Mishum dikalisha zekasa velo alima chalitza laf kuye zeka alimta ditzarasa. Wow! Listen to this. Shmuel says like this: since Shimon, you gave Rachel a get. Giving a get, I will say, what does giving a get do? Remember, let's go back. You see, everyone's essentially agreeing. What does giving a get effectively accomplish? One word. What does it accomplish? Gitzas. Something, a little bit. I will say, what it does do is, it diminishes the zika a little bit. Right? It diminishes the zika, the marital bond a little bit. So Shmuel posits something amazing. When you give chalitza to Rachel, you're giving chalitza on a diminished marital bond. That's fine for Rachel. She had a diminished marital bond. Who didn't have a diminished marital bond? Leah. And therefore Shmuel says something absolutely amazing. In this case, a chalitza on a diminished marital bond to Rachel will not free Leah. Wow. Absolutely. I mean, but I will say, but again, a solid svara, right? A svara that is a solid one, but quite fascinating. So the Gemara says, Sa'ai Shmuel, Damar Shmuel, Chalatz Abasi, Shmuel says, Ki Amri Ana, I say my position, Aliba Deman Damar Yesh Zeka. Shmuel says, okay, that's because I hold Yesh Zeka. Gamliel Sabar, Ein Zeka. Gamliel holds Ein Zeka. We'll see, remember again, we've spoken about this so many times, that halacha l'maisa, again, this is a fundamental machlokes throughout Yevamos. Namely, what is the nature of the marital bond, if any, between the surviving brother and the widows? Is there zika? Is there a quasi-marital bond? Shmuel says, I hold their zika. Therefore, again, when Shimon does chalitza with Rachel, after having given her a get, that's chalitza on a diminished marital bond. But the same zika, the intact zika, still applies between Shimon and Leah. Rabbi Gamliel holds ein zika. Rabbi Gamliel savra ein zika. Amid beis, Rabbanon savri yesh zika. And I will say, here's what's interesting. From the fact that you're going to tell me, remember again, there's machlokes in the Mishnah, Rabbi Gamliel and the Rabbanon. So if Rabbi Gamliel is going to hold in Zeka, then the Rabbanon must hold Yesh Zeka. The Katani Sefer, here's the problem. Look at the end of the Mishnah. V'cheinat ha'omer b'shnei yavmim v'yevama'achas. He said the same halacha applies, ultimately not just in a case of two widows to one brother, but it also applies with two brothers to one widow. Take a look at Rashi. V'katani sifa v'chinat ha'omer b'shnei yavmin de'im nasnu shneihem get choletz la le'echad mehem. So we'll say, let's say again, opposite case. Reuven dies, leaves behind Rachel, but there are two surviving brothers, Shimon and Levi. Shimon and Levi both give her a get. Both give Rachel a get. So what's the halacha? So Rashi says over here, Dimnasnu shtehem get choletz la echad mehem v'afilu rabbanan dem yesh zeker savila b'hachalitza ruah dechabinayu. So we're saying, now listen to this. What's the halacha when both Shimon and Levi gave Rachel a get? One of them has to do chalitza. But I don't understand. Based on what we just said before, if we hold yesh zeka, then perhaps again one chalitza shouldn't be enough. Perhaps both brothers should have to do chalitza. So lema tehevet yufta to Rabba Barafuna. Perhaps this should be a refutation, ultimately again of Rabba Barafuna. Ultimately, because this should also be a chalitza psula that's taking place after a get. Amar, so the Gemara says, let me tell you, Rabba Barafuna Amarav, Damra Barafuna Amarav, chalitza psula. Wow. Because listen to this. Rav Huna says the name of Rav that whenever you have a chalitza psula, I will say chalitza psula requires you to go to all of the brothers, which I will say is kind of a derivative as to what Shmuel was saying before. Namely, that I will say, when do we say that one chalitza closes the door for everyone? When is that so? When is that so? When it's a full strength, unadulterated chalitza. But if you're dealing with a chalitza psula, which I will say just means an imperfect chalitza, in order to dissolve the marital bond, Rav Huna says the name of Rav, every single brother has to do chalitza. Which I will say, therefore, what would that mean in the following case? In the following case, where Reuven passes away, leaves behind Rachel, two surviving brothers, Shimon and Levi, both brothers give Rachel a get. Both brothers, so we'll say, according to the Rabbanan and the Mishnah, we were assuming what's the resolution of that case? One brother has to do chalitza, and we're done. But according to Rav Huna in the name of Rav, that's not true. Who should have to do chalitza? Both brothers. Because whenever you're dealing with a we'll call it an imperfect chalitza, in order to dissolve that zika, both brothers need to do something. To which the Gemara says, Amalacha Rabba bar Rav Huna, bein Rabbi Gamliel, bein Rabbanan, Sabri ein zika. No, let's take a step back, Rabbi say. Both the Rabbanan and Rabbi Gamliel are holding ein zika. Which Rabbi, remember again, what does ein zika mean? Ein zika means that when you have a yibum situation, there is an obligation for the surviving brother to marry the widow, but there is no existing marital bond. There's no right. There's ein zika means there's no existing marital bond. So what's the machlokes here? V'halcha beget achar get u'ma'amar achar ma'amar k'mifliki. Rabbi said, let's go back to what we said before, right? Halacha l'maisa. The fundamental machlokes of us over here is what? The effectiveness of get achar get, ma'amar achar ma'amar. Like we said before, Rabbi said, and the way we framed it was the fundamental machlokes is with whom does the zchus of, when I say zchus, I mean the license for ma'amar and get rest with. Does it rest with the yavam, in which case all there is one of each per yibum scenario? Or does it rest with the Yevama, in which case, again, each woman comes with her own ma'amar get option? That's the machlokes, Rabbi Gamliel and the Rabbanon. Good. Amar Mar, what's another case? Asam ma'amar. By the way, I want to point out, I know this is a little bit confusing now. We're actually going to see, I don't know if we're going to get to it today, but we're going to see the Shulchan Aruch. I think I put it on the WhatsApp, I think I sent out the WhatsApp chat. I also have hard copies of it. The Shulchan Aruch actually goes through this. Right, so we're going to see this actually like framed halacha lamaisa. So don't worry, we're going to see resolution. Amar asam ma'amar bezu ma'amar bezu. So we'll say, now listen to this. You did ma'amar with both women. So remember again, Reuven passes away, leaves behind two widows, Rachel and Leah. Shimon now does ma'amar with Rachel, ma'amar with Leah. Rabbi Gamliel Omer, no sin get l'rishona b'chol leitzla. So we'll say, now back to the Mishnah. Okay, we know this. We'll say easy. Right? Ma'amar Rachel, Ma'amar there. Rabbi Gamliel says, what do you do? We'll say, now obviously, you can't do Yibum, right? Why can't you do Yibum anymore? Why can't you do Yibum? Right, because remember, as I just said, the moment you do something with the second woman, Yibum is done. Right, Yibum is done. So even though it was mamar that you did over here, but the moment you go ahead and you get and you do something with the second wife, so the door to Yibum is closed. So according to Gamliel, mamar achar mamar. Remember again, Gamliel says no problem. Give a get to the first wife. After get, what do you have to do? So you need get to dissolve the mamar, but get is not the full antidote. What else do you need? Chalitza. And then ultimately again, v'asar b'krovosah. And then wife number one is your chalitza, and therefore again you are usher to her and usher to her relatives. Umuter b'krovos shnia. Rabbi say again, according to Gamliel, when it comes to wife number two, you're not permitted to marry wife number two because she's also considered your chalitza. But lamais again, you can marry her relatives. Okay, so let's go. Let's pick this apart again. So michti kasar Gamliel in mamar achar mamar. So Rabbi Gamliel holds that in mamar achar mamar, right? Well, so that's what we've established. So if that's the case, tisyabim rishona nami tisyabim. Wow. I will say, why are we taking yibum off the table? Why are we taking yibum off the table? In other words, if we hold in ma'amar achar ma'amar, if that's what we hold, then why are we taking yibum off? This is such a good kasha, right? In ma'amar achar ma'amar. So let's play this out. Shimon is here. He has two widows in front of him, Rachel and Leah. So now we're saying, well, you did ma'amar with Rachel, you did ma'amar with Leah. There's only one resolution to this case, which is what? Give a get to Rachel, do a get with Rachel. Give a get to Rachel, do chalitza with Rachel, and we're done here. Why? If you hold in mamar achar mamar, that means the mamar with Leah is inconsequential and irrelevant. If that's the case, then what? Why isn't there an option of yibum with Rachel? Good kasha. To which the Gemara, I'll tell you why. Dilma asi liyabum lishnia. Because what we're concerned about is that if we allow yibum with Rachel, you may come to what? Do yibum with Leah. And I will say that, of course, would be problematic because yibum with Leah after you've done ma'amar with Rachel is at least rabbinically aser. So I will say that's what we're concerned. If we allow yibum in this case, even though technically speaking you're right, according to Rabbi Gamliel, ein ma'amar achar ma'amar. Only the ma'amar with Rachel is relevant. The ma'amar with Leah is irrelevant. Yibum should be permitted. We're concerned about confusion. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. So we'll see. Here we go. Last part of this sugya, really, really exciting. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says as follows: Rabbi Gamliel, Ubei Shammai, V'Reb Shimon, Uben Azai, V'Reb Nechemia. What a chaver! Kulhu sviralei ma'amar kona kinyan gomer. They will say ultimately again, all of these opinions mentioned, all agree that ma'amar affects full kinyan. Then I will say now let's just clarify what that means. Ma'amar requires full kinyan. So what that means is ein ma'amar achar ma'amar. That essentially once you do ma'amar with wife number one, anything you do with wife number two is what? Inconsequential. All of these opinions hold this way. So let's go through them. I will say it's very exciting. So Rabbi Gamliel, Hada Amran. Okay, Rabbi Gamliel, so we already said that, right? We've already spent our time. We already know that. Good. We'll say, what about Beis Shammai? Very exciting. We learned this as well. Watch this. Beis Shammai, Nissan, Shlosha Achin. Also remember again, let's see a little chazar, a very exciting case. Shlosha Achin, you have three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Shnayim mehen nisun l'shtei achayos. Now watch this. Reuven and Shimon are married to two sisters. Right? So Reuven and Shimon are married to Rachel and Leah. In this case, Rachel and Leah are sisters. And I will say ve'echad mufna. And Levi's single. Right? Levi's been learning Yevamos. He's like, forget it. Right? And so I'll say, right? So Levi's single. Right? So Reuven and Shimon married to two sisters. Levi's third brother is single. Meis echad mi ba'ale achayos. So I'll say, now watch this. One of Meis echad mi ba'ale achayos. So I'll say, now we'll call it Reuven dies. So Reuven dies. Now Rachel falls to Yibum. Va'asa ba mufne ma'amar. Levi, the single brother, does ma'amar with Rachel. Okay, so again, let me just frame the case once more. Three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Reuven and Shimon married to two sisters, Rachel and Leah. Right? Levi, single. Reuven dies. He has wife, Rachel, falls to Yibum. Levi, single brother, does ma'amar with Rachel. Okay, so far so good. Here's the wrinkle. V'achar kach meis achiv. Now Rabbi say, now Shimon dies. So I'll say, just see what just happened. Now Shimon dies. Shimon's widow Leah, now also falls to who? To Levi. What's the problem? Levi now has two sisters. Now remember again, Levi has done ma'amar with Rachel, and now Leah just fell to him in Yibum. So what's the halacha? The Gemara says, Beishamai omrim, ishto imo, v'halazu teitzi mishuma chozisha. Watch this. So Beishamai says, there's no kasher here. Levi already did ma'amar with Rachel. Because he did ma'amar with Rachel is viewed as his wife. So what happens to Leah? What's what happens to Leah? Nothing. Why? Because we'll say again, back first Mishnah Maseches Yevamos. This is Achos Ishto, wife's sister, and wife's sister is totally removed from the parsha of Yibam at all. No chalitza, no nothing. Now we'll say, what do you see from here? That according to Beis Shammai, ma'amar kona. Beis Shammai essentially affects marriage. I will say we don't paskin that way, but Allah, remember again, it's not psak halacha. The Gemara is trying to show that there's a whole cohort of people that subscribe to this idea that ma'amar essentially affects marriage. So here we go. That was Beis Shammai. Who's next? Reb Shimon, the Sanya. Amar Reb Shimon Chamer. Also listen to this. This is also a fascinating case. Take a look at Rashi just to give you a little bit of the context over here. I'm sure at least we'll begin this case today. So what does Reb Shimon say? Reb Shimon. The Kamam Perkin, I will say, listen to this. Kamam Perkin, Isha Rabba, Ben Teisha Shana B'yom Echad, Haba Al Yevimto. So I'll say, here's the case. In general, halacha l'maisa, in order to affect yibum, or in order to affect marriage, I should say, you have to be a gadol. Right? You have to be an adult. Adult is being defined as bar mitzvah, right? 13 years old. There is an interesting fact over here, which is that although you have to be a gadol to affect marriage, the bia with a boy above the age of 9.5 is considered to be a halachically recognized act of bia. But I'll give you an example. Let's say a married woman has relations with a 9.5-year-old boy. So I'll say, what's the halacha? The halacha is that's adultery. Now again, obviously the boy is not held accountable because he's below the age of majority. But halacha l'maisa, that is considered to be a halachically recognized act of bia. So you have an interesting, therefore, application of this. Let's say again, Reuven dies, and he leaves behind two brothers, Shimon and Levi, twins, and they're 9.5 years old. I will say what happens, they have bia with the Abama, right? They have bia with the widow. So I will say, here's what's interesting about this. Remember again, Yibum, right? How is the Yibum relationship affected? How is it affected, I will say? It's not really affected through das, right? It's affected through bia. I will say, we're going to get into this, by the way, because there's a fascinating case about what happens if the Yavam and Yevama have bia, but there was no das for Yibum, right? There's just bia, but without das, right? Bia without das. So we'll say, we'll discuss some implications of that. So in this case over here, you have a halachically recognized bia with someone who's not capable of affecting marriage. Incredible, no? Absolutely. So look at Rashi. Let's say, fascinating case, no? Not for the Shabbos table, but a fascinating case. So listen to this. So the Gemara says, right? So a boy, the Yavam, is 9.5 years old, and he has relations ultimately again with the widow. The chazer uba achiv ben teishan b'yom echad, and I will say we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up Miriam Hashem with this case tomorrow. Shkoyach.